The fate of Hitler's desperate final offensive hung not on steel or gunpowder. Weather would decide everything. Dense fog meant Allied blindness. Their mighty air fleets sat useless, while abandoned troops faced annihilation. The moment sunshine pierced through, the heavens picked their champion. From the miraculous rescue at Bastogne to the catastrophic failure of Bodenplatte, nature itself determined survival and destruction. Europe's winter atmosphere should have guaranteed Allied dominance. Month after month, endless formations of heavy bombers, fighter planes, and attack aircraft had demolished German forces from above. December 1944 changed everything. The sky turned traitor. Impenetrable walls of mist, snow, and freezing clouds smothered the Ardennes region. Ground crews heard engines warming up below, but overhead remained empty. History's mightiest aerial armada sat chained to frozen concrete, while Hitler's divisions charged forward under nature's protective blanket. Bastogne's encircled defenders endured the most crushing silence imaginable. Through gray curtains above, they whispered frantic prayers, not for ammunition or rescue forces, but for golden sunlight. Only blazing sunshine could shatter the weather's curse and summon the aircraft that offered hope. Hitler had staked everything on those concealing clouds. Dark skies would let his armor slice through Belgium, seize Antwerp, and split Allied forces completely. Clear weather would incinerate his final gamble in moments. The Bulge battle raged not merely in forests and frozen towns. It erupted above them too, between deathly quiet and roaring thunder, between treacherous clouds and skies transformed into instruments of judgment and rescue. This chronicles the aerial struggle during Hitler's last great attack, days when fog strangled Allied power, the instant when heaven's vault split open and showered molten steel on German formations, the doomed assault on January 1st, when the Luftwaffe hurled its remaining strength into the flames. Weather patterns would seal the fate of Hitler's desperate gamble. Winter 1944 found Adolf Hitler completely trapped. Soviet armies hammered into Germany from eastern borders. Western allies had flooded across France since D-Day landings. Round-the-clock bombing pulverized German cities into rubble. The Reich bled toward death. Yet Hitler still imagined one final strike could reverse the war's momentum. He named it Wacht am Rhein. The strategy demanded a massive surprise assault through Ardennes woodlands, breakthrough across Meuse waterways, and Antwerp's capture. One devastating blow would separate British and American armies, isolate them, possibly force Western allies toward peace negotiations. Desperation and arrogance birthed this wild gamble. One towering obstacle overshadowed all others: Allied air supremacy. Since Normandy operations, Allied aircraft ruled the skies completely. Bomber fleets roamed without challenge. Fighter bombers transformed every highway into killing grounds. German soldiers trembled at thunderbolt whistles and typhoon screams. Neutralizing aerial threats was essential. Otherwise, the offensive meant mass suicide. Hitler believed he'd discovered the solution. Not through artillery or armored vehicles, but weather manipulation itself. December Ardennes offered natural weaponization opportunities. Dense forests concealed supply columns. Snow blinded artillery spotters. Above everything, winter's cloak of fog and storms. Heavy cloud cover would trap the Allied juggernaut of 8,600 aircraft on airfields. Against this, the Luftwaffe scraped together barely 200 to 300 fighters. Most pilots were teenagers with half their enemy's training hours. Under December's dark canopy, numerical disadvantages became irrelevant. General Omar Bradley later wrote bitterly in his aide's personal diary, "Weather remains our constant enemy. Our aerial efforts today achieved practically nothing." The contrast felt devastating. Months earlier, Allied pilots soared unchallenged, destroying trains, obliterating bridges, machine-gunning convoys. During the Ardennes offensive's opening days, airfields lay motionless. Runways disappeared under snow. Wings froze to earth. The hunters sat caged while Germans advanced. December 16, 1944 began Germany's final major gamble under hostile skies. Panzer formations rolled through mist. Infantry units marched beneath frozen cloud layers. For once, engine thunder overhead didn't determine battlefield outcomes. Silence did. The bulge emerged from silence that felt like abandonment. Fog refused to dissipate. Day after endless day, the Ardennes remained suffocated under gray blankets. American airstrips stood empty. Runways remained frozen solid. Squadron after squadron sat grounded. Mechanics warmed engines, checked cockpits, loaded ordnance. But skies stayed closed. For German ground forces, this seemed like divine intervention through natural forces. Truck convoys, panzer columns, infantry divisions numbering tens of thousands streamed through forests. Above them stretched emptiness. No thunderbolt roaring, no typhoon shrieking. Only boot crunches in snow and steel track grinding across ice. Initial offensive days smashed through weak American defensive lines. At Schnee-Eifel, the 106th Infantry Division found itself caught in tightening steel jaws. 9,000 soldiers surrounded, isolated, abandoned beneath suffocating fog. They screamed for air support. They begged for supply drops. But aerial warfare remained silent. When the pocket collapsed, thousands marched into captivity, stumbling eastward through identical snow that had concealed their captors. It ranked among America's worst wartime defeats. Western sectors witnessed Bastogne's developing tragedy. Over 20,000 men from the 101st Airborne and supporting units faced complete encirclement. Cut off from fuel, food, ammunition supplies, defenders carved foxholes in frozen ground. Their breath formed icy mist. Hands shook from cold and starvation both. Radio calls for help received responses. C-47 transport aircraft would deliver supplies. Again, weather intervened. December 18th offered a brief opening. British crews loaded transports. Cargo bays crammed with ammunition crates and medical packages. Pilots stood ready. Engines warmed up. Then confusion struck. Orders issued, cancelled, reissued repeatedly. Miscommunication strangled the mission until opportunity vanished. By the time clarity returned, the window had slammed shut. Fog rolled back in. Bastogne remained empty-handed. Inside the besieged perimeter, hope evaporated. One paratrooper remembered later, "We stopped praying for reinforcements. We prayed for sunshine instead. Without sun, we'd never hear those engines." German forces tightened their stranglehold. Artillery bombardments pounded the town relentlessly. The encirclement grew smaller. Defenders stared upward through gray curtains, knowing salvation waited there. Just thousands of feet overhead. But weather shackles prevented contact. Allied High Command endured sky silence agony. Their greatest weapon, their decisive advantage, sat imprisoned. Bradley and Eisenhower watched helplessly as German spearheads pushed deeper. The First Army bled in snow. Ardennes had become weather's battlefield, not controlled by armor or guns, but by cloud formations. Christmas approached while Bastogne's defenders faced their most terrifying question. Would they starve under skies that refused to fight? Silence couldn't continue forever. Somewhere above that endless gray ceiling, sunlight was waiting. December 23rd morning brought the miracle. Bitter winds swept fog away completely. Clouds ripped apart. For the first time in 7 days, brilliant sunlight blazed across Ardennes terrain. Pilots squinted against sudden glare while climbing into cockpits. Engines roared across England, France, Belgium. Ground shook under propeller thunder. Orders were shouted. Wings lifted skyward. Suddenly, Allied forces owned the sky again. Above Bastogne, trapped paratroopers looked up and gasped. Through crystal winter air came Salvation's deep, droning hum. 241 C-47 transports swept into formation, escorted by fighters like protective hawks. One after another, transports opened their cargo doors. White parachutes bloomed against blue sky. Ammunition crates, food rations, medical supplies drifted down through snow. Men cheered, wept, scrambled to catch them. Miracles arrived wrapped in canvas and silk, but Salvation carried weapons too. As transports departed, P-47 Thunderbolt swarms, P-38 Lightnings, British Typhoons dove into valleys. Hunting German vehicle columns jammed along icy roadways. Convoys that moved freely in fog now stood exposed under merciless sunshine. Trucks exploded in flames. Fuel convoys erupted into towering black smoke pillars. Tank turrets blew skyward. Soldiers scattered like insects as rockets screamed downward, ripping apart bridges and crossroads. One German officer later admitted, "We stopped moving during daylight. Roads became death traps. Movement was forced into nighttime shadows, but night movement slowed supplies. Fuel supplies thinned. A war machine built for lightning warfare suddenly faced sky terror paralysis." Meanwhile, Bastogne's airlift continued daily. By December 27th, nearly 1,000 C-47s had dropped over 800 tons of supplies. Gliders brought surgeons, medics, fuel. Wounded were evacuated, lifting morale almost as much as rations did. Defenders, once starving, now had bread and bullets. The town held firm. Every dropped crate whispered identical truth. The sky had switched allegiances. Transformation was complete. What had been silence and betrayal days earlier was now thunder and revenge. Fighter bombers struck not only columns and tanks, but German artillery positions choking Bastogne directly. Christmas Day witnessed 4 concealed Panther tanks opening fire on American Shermans. Before reloading, Thunderbolts streaked overhead, firing rockets into tree lines. Panthers bolted for cover, only to be destroyed in open ground by waiting Allied guns. Rockets hadn't killed them directly, but flushed them into slaughter zones. This represented partnership warfare. Air and ground, hunter and prey, sky and earth cooperating. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Where fog once crippled Allies, sunshine now suffocated Germans. The Luftwaffe attempted sorties, but found themselves outnumbered 3-1. Their pilots were outflown and outfought. German high command realized quickly. Ardennes had ceased being their battlefield. It belonged to the sky, and the sky showed no mercy. New Year's Day, 1945, dawned with frost clinging to occupied Europe's runways. Allied airfields lay quiet. Aircraft parked wingtip to wingtip, noses pointed into winter wind. The Luftwaffe had waited for this moment. Bodenplatte, Hitler's final sky strike. Over 1,000 German fighters, Bf-109s, Fw-190s, Me-262 jets scrambled from bases and roared westward. Engines thundered, wings trembled. Every ounce of Luftwaffe strength hurled into flames. To German pilots, mostly young and undertrained, this felt like destiny. They flew low, skimming frozen fields and villages, hoping to surprise the Allies. For once, hunters would become hunted. For once, German skies would rule again. But fate intervened differently. German anti-aircraft batteries, unaware of the mission's secrecy, mistook formations for Allied bombers. Flak opened fire. Explosions tore through sky. 16 German fighters fell burning before crossing front lines. Dozens more limped back, riddled with holes, trailing smoke. Survivors pressed onward. At Eindhoven, Brussels, dozens of other airfields, the storm struck. FBU-190s and BF-109s swooped down like hunting hawks, strafing parked Mustangs, Typhoons, Thunderbolts. Bombs crashed into hangars. Fires erupted across tarmac. By day's end, 305 Allied aircraft were destroyed on ground, nearly 200 more damaged. For one brief, terrible moment, it worked. Pilots scrambling from barracks ran into chaos. Engines screamed as they attempted takeoffs under fire. A British Typhoon leaped from runway just as tracers stitched across wings. An American P-51 burst into flames before climbing above trees. Sky came alive with fire and panic. But then, the storm reversed. Allied pilots, veterans hardened by years of combat, fought back with cold precision. Luftwaffe's young men, many with under 170 flight hours, found themselves outflown, outgunned, outnumbered. Dogfights erupted across dawn sky. German formations shattered. FBU-190s spiraled earthward. BF-109s were shredded by 50 caliber fire. What began as daring strike descended into massacre. By nightfall, the price was staggering. 271 German aircraft destroyed. Over 200 pilots killed, wounded, captured. It wasn't just defeat. It was the Luftwaffe's death knell. General Adolf Galland, fighter commander, spoke words that would echo through history. "We have sacrificed our final reserves. Never again will the Luftwaffe rise in large numbers to challenge Allied dominance above Europe." The contrast was absolute. Yes, Allies lost planes, but factories replaced them within days. New Thunderbolts, Mustangs, Typhoons rolled off assembly lines faster than the Luftwaffe could count its dead. But Germany had no such lifeline. Every pilot lost was irreplaceable. Every fighter destroyed was a wound that would never heal. Bodenplatte was meant to seize skies. Instead, it shattered Luftwaffe's last strength. Hunters had become hunted. The strike meant to blind Allies had left Germany permanently blind. From that morning forward, the Luftwaffe would never rise again as a fearsome force. European skies belonged to Allies completely, irrevocably, forever. Bodenplatte's wreckage still smoldered when skies closed once more. Snow swept in, thickened mercilessly, sealing battlefields beneath white shrouds. January 6th through 9th grounded Allied fighter bombers again. Runways froze solid. Engines sat silent. Heavens, so recently blazing with fire, returned to silence. But this time, it no longer mattered. The Luftwaffe was shattered. Veteran pilots lay in graves or prison camps. Fighters burned on frozen fields. Germany's air arm was ghostly, incapable of seizing opportunities even when weather offered them. What had once been Hitler's greatest weapon, storms themselves, was now powerless without men and machines to exploit them. On ground, the Wehrmacht felt losses in every heartbeat. Fuel convoys stalled in icy woods, terrified of daylight movement. Trains derailed under bombs. Artillery starved for shells. One German staff officer later confessed, "Our artillery was cut in half. Ammunition couldn't reach front lines. American guns could see, and ours could not." Bastogne, once choking on hunger, now breathed freely. Supplies flowed in by tons. Wounded were lifted out. Living filled their positions. Rifles newly stocked with ammunition. December 27th, the siege broke. Paratroopers marched through ruined streets, battered but unbroken. Contrast couldn't have been sharper. German soldiers trudged backward, retreating through villages they'd once taken with fire and fury. American tanks rolled forward under skies that no longer frightened them. Hunters had become hunted. Ardennes had transformed from battlefield into graveyard. Strategic bombers, flying far above storms, carried on their work without pause. Towns like Houffalize, St. Vith, Honingen were reduced to rubble, cutting arteries of German advance. Even as snow muffled the world below, steel rain continued falling. By mid-January, the offensive was finished. German spearheads that had driven deep into Belgium were shattered. The bulge they carved into Allied lines had collapsed, leaving only corpses, burned armor, broken roads behind. The Ardennes campaign ended not with triumph, but exhaustion. For Germans, it was a final gasp. For Allies, it proved war's tide could never reverse. Sky had chosen sides. Ground war followed. The bulge wasn't decided by tanks alone, nor rifles in snow. Sky decided it. For weeks, fog had betrayed Allies, silencing thunder from their air fleets, leaving entire divisions bleeding in forests. But when clouds broke, when sun returned, sky became executioner, judge, savior, all at once. It saved Bastogne, where starving paratroopers caught parachutes falling like heaven's manna. It judged German convoys, burning them on roads they'd believed safe. It executed the Luftwaffe, ending its life in one desperate New Year's strike. Those days revealed more than tactics. They revealed weather's power as weaponry. They revealed Germany's last hope's fragility. They revealed something new's birth. Modern electronic warfare. Jackal missions, those primitive jamming flights, marked the first time air itself became a signals battlefield, where voices and orders could be strangled before reaching ground. Future wars' seeds were sown in frozen sky. But above all, the legacy was human. Pilots who flew through flak and storms to drop supplies. Paratroopers who prayed not for reinforcements, but sunlight. German soldiers who marched in darkness, knowing daylight meant death. Hitler's Ardennes gamble ended like all his gambles did, in ruin. The bulge collapsed. The Reich collapsed with it. Survivors never forgot what it felt like looking upward and seeing either silence or salvation. Winter 1944, sky chose its side. With it, Europe's war was decided.